Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today I am joined by my friends and colleagues Alex and Dana to break down your Sun and Rising sign horoscopes for the month of December. So we are going to be looking at two major transits for the month of December through all 12 whole sign horoscopes, and that is going to be Mars's retrograde in the sign of Leo, alongside of the Jupiter-Saturn square that is taking place between the signs of Gemini and Pisces. These two transits really are the major transits of the month, and so we'll be looking at those for you today and giving you some sense of what you can expect. We recommend listening for your rising sign because that will correspond to the whole sign house transits of your birth chart. Of course, Hellenistic astrologers use the whole sign house system, so that's what we recommend for that reason. You can listen to whatever sign you like. If you like to listen to your sun sign, just listen to that one instead. So you have options. That is our agenda for today. Remember, before we get into it, to like and subscribe. It really helps our channel to grow. We thank you, everybody who's been pitching in to help our channel grow in the past couple of months. We've doubled our subscriber total per month. So that is thanks to all of you for helping make this channel successful. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. As you all know, we are in the midst of our 11th annual Kickstarter campaign right now, and we are on our way to our backer goal for the year, which is 1,937 backers by January 1st. We are on our way toward that goal. I'm going to take you over to the Kickstarter screen right now. And here on the Kickstarter screen, you will see that there is an option to donate. And then when you donate, there are a variety of rewards that you can choose. Huge discounts on all of our programs online, over 50% off and more when you bundle some of them together. And we have a variety of other offerings. You can also pick up horoscopes for the year ahead. That package includes about 45 minutes on each of the 12 signs, and you get all 12 signs with that bundle. So that's a really a nice deal that we have for you. As a thank you for your donation. After today's video, you can stick around to learn more about all of the donations that we offer so you can kind of understand what your choices are when you donate and support the channel. Really appreciate your help, and we are off to a good start. Thanks to all of you who have pitched in already. If you can't afford to pitch in, we always appreciate just prayers and good vibes being sent our way that we would be able to sustain and continue developing content for the year ahead. Our programs and the success of the Kickstarter, what I should say is the success of the Kickstarter allows all of our programs to be really flexible in their pricing. So the Kickstarter is a huge part of how we make sure that everything we do is affordable, from the donation-based reading service that we have with different tiered pricing to all of the affordable options for our programs. All of the proceeds from the Kickstarter help support our staff and everything we do. So again, a huge thank you to everyone, and I hope you'll consider supporting the channel again in the year to come. Okay, on that note, I am very excited to have Alex and Dana back to break down your horoscopes for the month ahead. Hey guys.
Hi.
Oh, hey.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome back. Yes. Pluto's back in Aquarius. Election is over. The night of doom is at hand.
Just go there. Let's just go there.
Might as well. I'm just kidding. So I have been dealing with more, like, it's funny how after the election results, if I had to classify the kinds of comments I've been getting or questions, the kind of social media feedback, it has all shifted toward, is the world going to be okay? Mm-hmm. And I think it's just it's really interesting because there's just such a powerful emphasis on the destiny of the collective with Pluto now in Aquarius to stay. It's like it's out of Capricorn. It's not going back to Capricorn. It's in Aquarius. And while some people obviously right now are feeling very, very good about the direction of history and the collective, there's another group of people who are feeling like it is the end, like it is a very dire time. Yeah. And it's very polarized right now, obviously, in the United States around that conversation. And so I think that what's really good to remember, I was just doing a video on Pluto in Aquarius a couple weeks ago that I put out. And in that video, I mentioned the fact that there were mystics in a lot of different ancient traditions that emphasized that even though a collective, a society might be on one trajectory, like it could be the Kali Yuga from an Indian perspective, the dark age, or it could be a golden age, that the consciousness of individuals will not necessarily be exactly the same as the condition of the collective. In other words, the collective might be going through hell, but your consciousness can still be experienced within a realm that's happy or blissful or heavenly. That individual consciousness and collective consciousness are not identical to one another. I think that's an important tension to keep in mind as we are inevitably drawn into the collective dramas that are unfolding, that we all each have to care for and cultivate an individual consciousness. And it's not that we ignore or somehow bypass the collective reality, but I think, for example, the bodhisattvas, here are completely enlightened beings who come back into a world that is suffering, and their consciousness is not somehow now suffering. They're still in a completely realized and blissful state, and yet they're living in a world that is, collectively experiencing tremendous suffering. Not that we're bodhisattvas, but I think the idea is that we have to learn how to cultivate peace and happiness and something that can be a shelter within ourselves, even if we experience what's happening in the collective as very tumultuous. And I think that's going to be important, not only right now, but in the years to come, with Saturn and Neptune entering Aries next year, with Pluto in Aquarius. So those are some of the things that have been on my mind since last month's astrology, when we were on the brink of all of these major transits that came through. But that's enough out of me. What have you guys been going through? What's been new for both of you?
Alex, your face. Well,
I mean, Mars is in my first house right now, so I'm hitting the gym and I'm taking a stand for my own individual sovereignty and just generally trying not to scream. That's just, this is kind of how I've been experiencing it. But no, I agree with you, Adam. I think that there's one of the things I've heard, and, in watching some YouTube and just anybody who made a prediction on this election, by the way, like, hats off to you, because there's a lot of fallout that I've seen going on around all of that. And, one thing I have heard as a common thread, though, is finding your people, finding your tribe, making individual connections. It's like, all right, find the people that you can relate to and connect with. And I was like, if there isn't a more Aquarius phrase or idea that I've ever heard, it's like we're in this in of myself, I am nothing kept coming to me this week, right? If I'm just trying to do this on my own, it's going to be really hard. But if I have people that I can talk to, that I can connect with, that I can whatever, and find that sense of not only community, but that sense of connection and shared interest. That to me feels like that intention of Aquarius moving forward. It may not be manifesting the way we thought it might, but or maybe it is for some people. It is manifesting how they thought it would. But I've been really considering that for myself lately. It's like, where's my tribe, and who are my people, and who am I connecting with? That sort of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same. I think that's really important for anyone feeling alienated right now. And I know, people who are struggling with the results, the people in America, right? I think that's super important. Adam, you kind of made me think about something I hadn't thought about before just now, which is maybe the shadow of Pluto and Aquarius being like an overwhelming amount of information. I think we've been experiencing that just in this digital age, but I found myself post-election really immersing myself. I wanted to understand it. Like, I wanted to know everything. And there came a point where I was like, this is not helping. Like, I am spiraling. And I'm facilitating my own spiraling by just reading take after take after take. Like, this isn't helpful anymore. And I think the antidote to that is what you were saying, Alex. Like, let's just ground ourselves in real life with real people. I was lucky to do a live event. You guys know about this. I did live readings for the first time last week, and it was the first time I ever did live readings in person. My friends, my sister came out. It was so healing to be in community with people. Yeah. Like, I hadn't been with people like that in such a long time. And so I think what you said, Alex, is so important. And the flip side of that is, like, let's not get swept up in the tidal wave of hot takes and lose ourselves.
Yeah. One of the things that I read in this video that people I'm sure will be familiar with if you watched the video I did on the day that Pluto went into Aquarius, I think it was the 18th or of November, if I'm remembering correctly. Anyway, I read a passage from James Hillman, who had given a lecture on animism, and he, in this talk that he gave, he was talking about how the antidote to history, and he was talking about the tendency for us to get really swept up in a way of looking at reality that is historical. Like there's this one timeline, we're all on the same timeline, we all have the same collective arc, humanity will either screw it up or get it right. Like that, just that whole way of thinking, which is very Aquarian. And it's a real part of life. He doesn't deny that it's real, but he also says that part of the animistic worldview is to, like he said, he gave this really great example where he said, say you get a cat. You have the cat for 13 years, the cat dies. Maybe a year later, you get another cat. What you'll notice is not along the timeline of cats in your life that one was progressively better than the first one. You will notice differences between them because they're living beings. Mm-hmm. You won't compare them in a hierarchy of progress, right? And he said, when we lack an animistic view of the cosmos, we are always comparing moments in time as better or worse to one another, when moments in time are just as alive and living as a cat. Mm-hmm. And so that perspective is the one that he really wanted to push back with in response to people who get completely overly identified with the news cycle, which is all about historical arcs that we're all a part of. He's like, yeah, sometimes you have to check out of that and back into the animal body, which knows no such comparisons through linear space and time. And this is why also he mentioned in a number of pieces in that talk that, you know, various indigenous peoples around the world, the animistic view like history is very different. And he mentioned this in another talk where, you know, the way that you might remember let's say this autumn for me, right? This autumn was the autumn of pneumonia, right? Because my wife got pneumonia, my daughter got pneumonia. This autumn was the autumn of family sickness. So my dad had a major surgery. My sister got really ill. So looking animistically, we think of time in terms of qualities, not quantities. Like a quantitative view would be like, this was bad and it's progressively gotten better since then. A qualitative view would look and say, this was the fall of family sickness. And you memorialize it as an archetypal dimension of experience that's sacred. This was the summer of the buffalo, or what, you know, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I feel like astrology, I mean, like if there's one thing I feel like we can do as people who break down horoscopes for others, it's to give you ways of thinking about your life in terms of seasons rather than linear historical arcs of your life and everything's either getting worse or better.
Yeah, I love that.
I love that. There's we went to see an amazing exhibit at the planetarium and at the Museum of Science this weekend called One Sky. It's called the One Sky Project. And they did a whole exposition of different indigenous societies and some of the Western societies, how they make sense of the sky. And that was very much a part of the idea of like the different kinds of moons that would appear in a constellation. I believe it was for the Navajo, and how those were understood contextually as sort of what you're saying, Adam, makes a lot of sense in the way they were describing, like emergences, rather than, you know, this emerged here and this came back here, this emerges here and this comes back here. And it was really fascinating to see even the way that time was thought of as something very different and conceptualized very differently, looking at the same sky, just the way we conceptualize it and hold it in our minds.
I mean, think of the pressure we place on ourselves, just dovetailing off from what you're saying, Alex, when we discover something new scientifically, and immediately the first thought is, could this make X, Y, or Z better?
Yeah.
You know, than it's been. As soon as we think about that, often there's a kind of impulsivity, reactivity, an urgency that emerges, because if you can make something better, you ought to do it as quickly as possible, because then you're improving things. And why wouldn't you do it as quickly as you can if it's going to improve something? And of course, there's many great examples of that kind of thinking taking us forward, and it does. But archetypally, the shadow of that is also that when we're thinking so much about progress, in certain moments, we can forget to stop and digest experience and stop thinking about things as better or worse, and really work with ideas and let them present something maybe deeper than the initial thought that we have, which is so linear,
Yeah. Progress is not always the point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, these reflections have been brought to you by a group of astrologers whose opinions are worth a couple of pennies each. So
this is my 1.5 cents. I'll just
exactly.
But I will say, for the students of astrology, this is a very Aquarius conversation. Progress, what progress means. Are we going forward? Is it the right way forward?
Yeah. So we have some different alignments happening this month, a different season to consider. Maybe not better, maybe not worse, just a new season to consider through Mars's retrograde in the sign of Leo, and then this Jupiter-Saturn square. Mars in the retrograde of Mars, I've broken down on the channel a number of times. A few things to say. One is that there are remarkable opportunities for us to work with our own sense of willpower, motivation, agency, assertiveness, aggression, irritation, anger. Can we refine and develop a closer relationship? Some of us are so scared of getting it wrong with Mars because we don't want to hurt someone, or we don't want to wield it, in a bad way, that we maybe don't have enough of the Mars capacity. We need more of it, but we have to face it and learn how to, we might burn our fingers a little bit, but you have to if you're going to get to know Mars, right? So Mars retrogrades, I think, are interesting opportunities for us to work with Mars. Do you guys want to say anything more about just generally Mars retrograde?
I was thinking about Mars retrograde just contextually, knowing we were going to talk about Jupiter-Saturn too, and really just feeling like this is a moment of, the point is not progress right now. The point is, what do I want? Like, let's just pause and assess, knowing that Mars is going to move back. And I know we're talking about Mars and Leo, but Mars will retrograde back into Cancer. We're going to get to the root of a feeling about something. And I just don't think we're going to really know where we're going right now. And that, I think, can be really uncomfortable for people. So I think the name of the game for December specifically is like, can I be okay with stillness right now and see what it can teach me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, Dana. I think that there's a welcome. I think that there's a kind of Mars retrograde to me is surrendering your own will. There's a sense of like Mars gets caught up in the spin of the earth, the primary motion of the sky, which is the spin of the earth, the drama that's going on around us. And I think that sometimes that can be very, very helpful, because Mars, there's a certain time where you want to fight forward and move forward and make something happen and assert, and that's necessary. And I'm definitely feeling that as part of my lesson, my lessons right now. But there's also a time where it's like the more effective thing is to allow something bigger to carry you along. And I think the discernment between those two ideas will be our work over the next, of the 2 months that Mars is retrograde up until the end of February. There will be that kind of work, but it will look different in Leo than it will in Cancer. And I think Leo is a little bit more about like sometimes the best leadership, or whether it's in your own life or collectively, is about going with the flow of what needs to happen, as opposed to, trying to assert and say like, this is going to no matter what, because that Mars station is where we might see a little bit of that around those 2 weeks around December 7th, where it's like, I'm just pushing and pushing and pushing, but I can't make anything happen. And the message I've been getting lately around this is just like, let go of the wheel. Yeah. Let go of the wheel. Where does it need to take you in order to where we wind up at the end of February, to see where we wind up?
Yeah, I think Mars, the retrograde of Mars also allows us to squash old conflicts. Like we'll just pound fists and let it go. And I think if you can notice what isn't working, and rather than continuing to bang the head on the wall to let go, there's some kind of paradoxical empowerment that happens in a Mars retrograde.
Yes.
And that's so cool. It's like actually, if you just don't do it the way you've been trying to do it, that's getting you so frustrated, let go, you may find a much more powerful and effective way to move forward. But you have to be open to that. It's like the art of war. And also, like, I think I took jujitsu for a couple summers ago. And one of the things that I will never forget was that there's this feeling when you're in the grips of a black belt. And because I had to roll around on the mat with some black belts. And I was like, gosh, this guy's like letting me get in there, and like, oh no, he's setting me up, right? I think I'm getting somewhere. He's getting me into a position by making me think I'm getting him into a position. Mars is doing that with us. It's like Mars needs to get us into a position where we're exerting ourselves in a particular way, and all of a sudden Mars flips us, and the real black belt has, you know, and I feel like, but that's like if you can almost treat Mars retrogrades like they're a bit of a game and kind of have fun with it and allow yourself to be submitted. Like in jujitsu, it's like, you got me, tap, game's over, pound fists, let's play again. And I loved that. I loved that about jujitsu up until I broke my rib, and then I was done.
Ow!
I know. I was like, okay.
This hurts.
This very angry man got and put his knee on my chest, and I tapped. I said, okay, that's enough. And he was like, oh, sorry. And I was like, yeah, about 3 seconds too long there. My rib is cracked. But that was the end of jiu-jitsu for me. There's some people who like they're there and they're good people, but they like don't have an off switch. So, I don't know. It's a little crazy.
Yeah, no, there are guys like that. Their adrenaline gets going, and all of a sudden it's like, the demon took them over.
Exactly. Like it is a little dangerous. But anyhow, so the other thing that we're looking at right now is Jupiter-Saturn, and Jupiter-Saturn is a combination that usually is about reformations of larger structures and systems, and the ongoing revolutions and changes to structures and systems in our life that are religious, philosophical, mental, intellectual, organizational, but they can also be professional, psychological, inner. And so, but we're usually during Jupiter-Saturn dynamics, we're getting a lot of opportunities to reflect upon and revise systems and structures in our lives. That's the simplest way I know how to put it. They can be deeply existential or philosophical and religious. Obviously, right now, for example, as Jupiter and Saturn are coming together, we're seeing the transition of a government again. Even such a basic thing of there's a cabinet being put together and blah, blah, blah. It's very Jupiter-Saturn. Think back to 2020. Jupiter-Saturn were coming together as Biden was coming into office, and that was a transition, right? So these are rhythmic, and life is okay in that it needs and includes revolutions of systems and structure. It doesn't mean the whole world's falling apart that we have to do these things, even though sometimes it feels that way. It's like, well, if there's something wrong, and we can be perfectionists. It's like, no, life constantly needs to be adjusted. Haven't you ever been on a long car ride? You're constantly adjusting the windows, the heat, the temperature, got some food to turn the radio. I want to listen to this podcast. And we're always making modifications and modulations to life. And so these periods just reflect those times in which it's a little bit more important and significant and sort of necessary that we do so in one area or another. So we're going to be looking at those for all of you today too. Anything you guys want to add to Jupiter-Saturn before we dive in?
Just that, this is now Jupiter and Saturn. Even though Saturn's in Pisces, they're acting under the auspices of air now, because the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions are all taking place now for the next couple hundred years in the air signs. And so, one of the things that kept coming to mind for me about what's going on with this opening square is like drafts and like sealing the drafts. Like air can get in places. Air can find the little crevices and the little cracks. And there's something about like where we need to allow more sort of fresh air and light, but then also where like we need to sort of set up boundaries and set up containment. It's air and water are hard to contain. And so it's going to be very interesting to see, like what comes up around those generic symbols. But I just think it's fascinating now that this is an opening square in a completely new modality that none of us have lived through before. So it'll be very interesting to see how that manifests. Yeah, for sure.
When I was thinking about this second of the three squares we're going to get here with Jupiter and Saturn, it brought back up the idea of frustration that I was thinking about with Mars, that there's a potential as we're going through this shifting that you both have been talking about to be frustrated, especially with Mars here too. Like maybe it feels like a lack of progress, or like, here's the ideal, here's the reality. There's dissonance between them, and that is upsetting to me. So it just really reinforced for me the idea that this is a time of surrender, of letting go, of seeing what's happening so that we can just kind of let that guide us. And I think that that's hard for people, but that's what the moment is calling for.
Yeah, nicely put. Well, I think we've done some good reflecting on events that have happened since we last came together, and some nice looking forward at these transits generally. So let's go into them sign by sign. We always recommend listening to your rising sign, because that will correspond with the whole sign house version of your birth chart. That's where the transit is actually located in your birth chart right now. Of course, you can always listen to your sun sign. Just listen to that sign if you prefer it. All right, I'm going to put the real-time clock up, and we are going to begin. Dana will be taking the cardinal signs. I'll be taking fixed. Alex will be taking mutable. They're also called tropical, solid, and double-bodied. We may refer to them that way sometimes, but here we go with Aries. So we're going to be looking at Mars's retrograde in the 5th house, and we're looking at the application of Jupiter and Saturn across the 3rd and 12th for Aries. Dana, what do you think about this one?
Okay, the first thing I thought about was Saturn in the 12th. This has been going on for a little while now, but I've been thinking for Aries about cutting yourself off before you can begin. Like, where has that been coming up for you over these last couple of years? And with this square coming through with Jupiter, thinking about Jupiter representing like the ideal or like the expansive principle, there's something different you want to be doing maybe in your daily life and the way you move about your daily life. Maybe your environment you are looking to change. Maybe this is something with your siblings or some kind of communication that you've just got ideas. I think you've got ideas in that area of life, these 3rd house topics, but there's something kind of like cutting you off at the root with Saturn in the 12th. So I think that this is a time where you could understand that more deeply. And what's interesting to me about this is, Mars is obviously very important for you, Aries risings, is in your 5th house right now, trining the 1st house. I think this is a really good idea to look at projects you've abandoned, and see why, not to go back and figure out how to finish them necessarily right now, because as we've been saying, I don't know that like that's what this energetic moment calls for, although do you, like, if that's what makes sense to you, do it. I think this could be a really great time to understand why you've, abandoned is such a strong word and I don't want to shame anybody, but like why you let these projects go, these things you want to create, these things you want to build. If you've had trouble really getting them going, now could be a time where you could really understand why. And my suspicion is that we could kind of link it back to Saturn in the 12th and where you might be kind of containing yourself unnecessarily. And so I think that's kind of what we have to work through right now. And you could get a lot of clarity around what's been stopping you.
Nice.
I think it's interesting too that now with this, I'm looking at this Mars retrograde in your 5th house too for Aries rising, your ascendant ruler. And this may feel, especially with the North Node in your 1st house, like you got some gas back in the tank. You've stepped on the gas pedal. You're creating. You're going forward. It's all looking great. And then you hit around December 7th, December 8th, and Mars stations and turns retrograde. And it's like, but I've got just a little bit more to review before I do that. And there might be a little. Like you need to let your pressure valve off a little bit here, because there might be like some real built up steam in the engine to go forward, but it's not quite ready to go all the way forward yet. And that North Node, especially in your 1st house, is going to be really asking for the gas pedal. So just allowing, if it feels like there's a review process or having to go back over something, or there's some emotional or energetic loose end that's not quite tied up yet, that's okay. And it's okay for there to be a pause there. But for an Aries rising, the challenge often is to let go of the impetus to want to push even further forward. Because I could see that leading to, just grinding your gears around this time.
Yeah, I look at the fact that Mars retrograde in your 5th house is going to go through the series of oppositions to Pluto in the beginning of the year and at the beginning of the new year, as well as later down the line in the spring. And I just think compromise, because the the fifth house Mars is very much like the right to be me and the right to express myself in ways that are powerful and effective and creatively satisfying and unique and special. And the oppositional tension from Pluto in Aquarius might be saying something like, there's going to be some need to compromise with other people or with groups or with a greater social awareness of yourself as belonging to different communities or groups of people or even a field or industry that you belong to or something like that. So I could see this as being about an increasing sensitivity because North Node's also about to dip into Pisces in your 12th house. That Saturn kind of checking Jupiter in the third, as well as Mars retrograde, just makes me think greater sensitivity, heightened awareness to things that are outside of the scope of your own personal agenda or your own kind of your own character, and it's unique, but you may need to be more sensitive or aware of other people and greater realities than yourself, which might force some difficult compromises. Some of them maybe you shouldn't compromise with, but others may require a kind of sensitive, tactful modulation of your will and the reality of other people's wills. Nice. All right. Let's move along to Taurus rising. I've got the fixed signs. So I'm starting off with Mars retrograde in the 4th as a Taurus rising myself. One thing that is really, it's been on my mind a lot, and I'll just share a little personal story. So as Mars is slowing down to station as we're recording this, I've been really revising some of the subtle ways in which I work out. So this is like, the approach that I take to training. And I've recognized that some of the way in which I train reminds me of my grandpa, who was a Leo. And the 4th house, of course, is connected to home, family, karma. He was a Leo and a big Mars square sun guy and stuff like that. So I just am like, wow, some of the way I'm training resembles some of the work. I don't know what I would call it, like a workaholism or a stubbornness around how to work that my grandpa had. And that I've been shifting my approach to working more intensely, but less, right? So like fewer, but more focused workouts. And I'm just like, man, my grandpa never would have been able to do this. Right. And so I'm just sitting there going like, yeah, I'm retraining elements of how I use my will, of frustration, anger, how I think something can get accomplished through will and effort. And I'm revising it along some really deep ancestral lines. It seems like a really simple thing, but for me, this carries over into the way that I work as an astrologer, the way that I work in other areas of my life, and thinking to myself, there's a different way of working and realizing that this is ancestral. So that's what I'm anticipating as I'm actually really excited because I feel like this shift is one that could lead me to being healthier and happier and in a sense working less. And so I'm just sitting there going like, wow, for people who have Mars in the 4th house retrograde, the potential to almost dismantle old power structures that are somewhere in your psyche from the ancestral past. That's what I've been working with already. I anticipate that lots of Tauruses will be working around will, force, power, work, and the family background, the family karma in particular. I think of paternal figures with Mars and Leo, but look, it could be anyone in the family. I also think about old wounds, old hurts. I think about, I've been having dreams about my grandfather's war experiences. Wow. As soon as Mars entered Leo. So there's a lot there. But I also think about the fact that you've got Jupiter and Uranus. This is the second piece here. Let me actually highlight it so we can see it. So anyway, I think about that change of will or purpose in relation to family karma as a Mars in the 4th house kind of thing for Tauruses. And then Jupiter-Saturn across the 11th and the 2nd, I think about things like business and community. I think about things like assets, resources, and friends, groups, and allies. How are you shifting or changing the use of your skills, your resources, your time, your money, your energy, and how are those changes being informed by the various social groups or communities that you belong to? So one of the things, like, again, just to reflect on this, I think it's really interesting that as Saturn and Jupiter were coming together in August, we were putting together the donation-based reading service that we launched just recently. And really the first month or two of it launching is coming as these two planets are coming back together. So it's been about community awareness and a shift around the like almost like the business itself and the structure of the business and stuff like that. So that's how I've been experiencing Jupiter Saturn across the 11th and 2nd since August. So I think that's kind of neat. But shifts around community groups and things like money, resources, how the two are connected, what kind of allies make for good allies when it comes to things like earning money. Those are some of the things that come to my mind. What do you guys think?
That's so interesting, Adam. I think now that you said that about the Jupiter-Saturn dynamic as like having a responsibility to your communities. Like, I've got this thing that I've got these resources, Jupiter in the 2nd. I maybe have abundance. And I mean, I know it's Jupiter and Gemini, it's in detriment, but like you've got things to offer. And Saturn in the 11th says, you have a responsibility maybe to your friends, to the communities you're a part of, like share the wealth. So I don't know. That's what came to my mind as you were talking. And I love, like, that's a best case scenario. I think what you said about Mars in the 4th. And I love thinking about Mars retrograde as like an opportunity to, heal old wounds. And gosh, what did you say about, working smarter, not harder? Like, I don't have to effort so hard to make things happen.
Yeah, that's exactly. I don't think I said that phrase, but that's the one I was looking for.
Good.
Yeah, that is the one. So it's like my trainer came along and said, I got a new trainer and I started a new program. And he was like, you're working out for 90. If you work out like this, you can work out for 45. And I was like, at first I was like, I don't know. My cap moon is like, it's not good if it's not hard and long, and I was like, okay, I'll try, give it a try. So I tried and I was like, he's not kidding. Anyway, what I find interesting about him, one of his backgrounds, he's in IT, but he used to be in the special forces, which is like an incredibly highly disciplined and highly effective unit in the military. Super nice guy, like a teddy bear nice, but he is very good at knowing how to work smarter, not harder. So that's been Mars in the 4th for me so far. But anyway, you tell me more. What do you think, Alex?
I don't know. I love this because I keep feeling as an overarching energy here, kind of the forces of history. Like there's, and individuating from those, especially from our ancestral lines, is challenging stuff. And I think for, one thing I'm noticing here for Taurus rising, for a Venus-ruled sign, Venus-ruled signs tend to be other-focused, harmony-focused, unity-focused, making everything balanced in some way focused, harmonizing. This Mars retrograde and Uranus in your 1st house and, Saturn squaring Jupiter here, there's something about it to me that in a general sense says, really like Michelangelo carving out the David. I don't want to get too dramatic here, but it's like, discovering what was the you that's already been inside underneath a lot of stuff that may have been on top of it that was being nice or other focused or making sure other people were happy or they were in harmony. And it's just like Mars retrograde in the 4th house to me is like, who am I in relationship to myself? Uranus definitely in the 1st house has that feeling. And I think that has a big effect with Saturn in a superior position squaring Jupiter in the 2nd on, yes, there will be obligations to other people. And that's an inevitable part of life if we want to have a sort of, abundance with integrity and stuff like that, but not to let that override your own sense of individuality that's trying to emerge and push out of that in some way.
Yeah. I do think Mars retrograde can lead to super mundane things in the 4th house, like having to replace a heater. I don't know. It's like something about the pipes and the heating comes to my mind, or like something around home maintenance or repair. Like it's inevitable when something turns retrograde in the 4th house that something will literally have to do with your home, your property, your living environment. So I would watch for some of that too. But also just, I think you have to look at this also as like a deeply ancestral transit for Tauruses. All right, let's move forward to Geminis. Alex will take this one. I'll highlight here. We've got Saturn and Jupiter there, and Mars retrograde in the 3rd.
So this is interesting for Gemini risings. I feel like in your environment, and I kept coming back to this. What's around you every day, even in your mind, what feels like it is giving you the ability to assert, move forward, stand out, be your own sort of bright shining light. And then where does it feel like or where around you does it feel like there may be people who are like that? And it could verge with Mars and Leo into, are there people around you that are trying to contain you or box you in with their egos or their assertiveness or their energy just gets really big. And there's a sort of need for I think Saturn at the top of your chart and Jupiter in your 1st house, but especially Saturn at the top of the chart, to sort of have a sense of your image in the world having gravitas, having power, having seriousness, having weight. It's not always, I think for Geminis, that there's always a sense of, especially with Jupiter in that sign, I'm this light, child of Hermes, and I want to fly and I want to do these things and I want to experiment, I want to try. But feels to me like there's Saturn, especially Saturn moving direct and in superior position to Jupiter, maybe asking for some amount of gravitas is the word I keep coming back to. Something where you say, you're like, this is a very solid presentation of myself and my image in the world coming about from in your environment. It could be on the shadow side of it, feeling attacked, or it could be on the healthier, the lighter side of it, just feeling like you're being sort of pushed out into shining a little bit more, standing out a little bit more individually in your environment, and not losing the wonderful playfulness that makes Gemini so wonderful, but also recognizing sometimes there's a time to just move into the world and your surroundings and be seen with some seriousness and gravitas and responsible Saturn feeling type words like that.
Mm-hmm. Love that.
Yeah. You made me think, Alex, about the phrase like take a stand. I feel
Yes,
like
ma'am.
Jupiter in the
Yes,
1st,
ma'am.
there's been so much experimentation of like, who am I? Who do I want to be? This square with Saturn says like, be about it, like embody that, be it. But Mars in the 3rd is saying like, there's some kind of confrontation, maybe. Like I've thought about it, that particular placement of Mars reminded me of my first teaching job ever. And it was in an environment that was quite antithetical to my identity, right? Like I just felt like an outsider frequently, but it was like, oh God, I'm not going to think of the phrase, but the thing where it like the pressure cooker, maybe something like that. Like it forced me to take a stand in some ways. So I think that something might kind of come together with all the Jupiterian experimentation that's been going on for Geminis in the 1st house with this.
Yeah. I wonder Jupiter in Gemini in the 1st house feels like giving oneself permission to really expand and explore your own nature. And Saturn in Pisces in the 10th feels like it wants you to take that exploration and make sure that you're doing something very responsible with it. And it may even guilt trip or make you feel obligated or sort of held back from doing some of that. And I think there's a conversation to be had about whether I need to change or whether my career needs to change or whether the two need to change together. Does the career need to change to fit more of who I am, or do I need to change a little bit to, adapt better and fit in better at my work, or I could see those kinds of conversations happening. And then I feel like there are pretty, because I look across at the Mars opposite Pluto in the 3rd and the 9th, and obviously we're going to have a conversation for Geminis late in but the summer of 2025 from the Northern Hemisphere standpoint, with Uranus entering Gemini, trining Pluto in the 9th. And I think, yeah, this is also about beliefs and your philosophy and your outlook on life, or learning something new and adapting yourself to new ideas or something like that. And it's important that ideological or philosophical conflicts be allowed, that you find healthy space for them, because they're going to inform an ongoing process of identity transformation that really ramps up later in the year.
Yeah.
Okay, good for Gemini. All right, let's go to Cancer, and Dana will lead us off here. We've got the Jupiter-Saturn dynamic across 12 and 9, with Mars retrograding in your 2nd.
I am really intrigued by this. Like, this square between Jupiter and Saturn speaks so loudly to like a spiritual process, this like deeply alchemical kind of, obviously Saturn in the 9th being like, let me get serious about maybe my spirituality or what matters to me, my basic operating principles. What do I stand for? And Jupiter in the 12th just being this deep contemplation. I know a square is maybe it is a more challenging aspect, but there's something very productive in my mind about this particular setup that would not look like anything to someone just looking at you. It's like very internal, but there's the wheels are turning in terms of like, what matters to me? What are my spiritual principles, really? So it just feels like a very meditative, kind of contemplative time for Cancers. When I think about Mars in the 2nd, I think about like situations that make you ask, what do I have at my disposal? And what maybe did I have at my disposal that's like not working the way it used to, or isn't working the way I want it to anymore? There's some kind of reflection on like how I use what I have. Which might be informed by this dynamic that's happening in the 12th and the 9th. Like my spiritual principles are different. The way I'm seeing the world is different. So the way I use what I have is different. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking about.
I love that, Dana. You're having me reflect on the spiritual idea of between Jupiter and Saturn. So Saturn in the 9th house and Jupiter in the 12th. And one thing I've often noticed is you rarely have an astrology client who has Saturn in the 9th house. There's a sort of, I've had like one or two, maybe, but there's a little skepticism of a principle that can't be concretized in some way, and not all the time. There are those who like astrology who have that, but it's a signature I don't often see as an astrologer. And the other thing what it made me think of is the principle in Buddhism that actually drew me into Buddhism, 25 years ago now, which was the Buddha's emphasis on healthy doubt, which was this idea of like, don't just accept my word for something. Don't just take this as being true just because you read it in a book or someone taught it to you or someone sounds like they're making it sound very reasonable. Test it out. Work it out for yourself. And there's something to me here about a contemplative spiritual ideal that you're wanting to test. You're wanting to put the pedal to the metal a little bit. You're wanting to experiment a little and see, does this actually work for me? Is this something I've been taught? Maybe it's from a religious background, or maybe another spiritual background. It could be from even a philosophical background of some kind. And it may be very valid and very beautiful, but is it right for me? Is it something that I can test out in my everyday life and see, okay, well, I like this part of it. This part doesn't quite work. This part I've seen work. This part I haven't seen work. And working out your own sort of individual life philosophy, which could turn out to be any number of different things, but it comes from a kind of questioning, or skepticism, experimentation.
It's interesting that my wife is a Cancer rising, and something that I've noticed her going through all throughout the Jupiter-Saturn square in these two houses and in her own birth chart has been that things that happen that kind of, and they've been just, I'm not going to go into any of them, but I'll just say that they've been like just sort of like, oh wow, I wasn't expecting that. That's not what I thought it was, or something, where there's almost like a perception and then there's the reality.
Uh-huh.
And when you look at those perceptions versus the reality of something, the benefit is that it can help you reflect on why you make assumptions in the way that you do. You know, like my wife has been going, it's funny because that perception that I had, which turns out wasn't real, this other, you know, this is what was real in the situation, that's caused me to reflect on what I assume to be real or true, and like kind of where that's coming from within myself. For example, when you grow up, this is something that I've learned through Al-Anon, and I talk about this now and then on the channel. When you grow up in a family where denial that alcoholism is present, right? It's kind of gaslighting. Like you're not seeing, this is not real. What you think is real is not real. Well, then it becomes easy later in life to trust your instincts in certain situations, right? And then when you realize that, well, what you thought was real wasn't really real, and you realize, oh, I didn't trust my instincts, that can lead you into greater awareness of like a pattern in your life in general. And, oh, it's related to the alcoholism in the family. I have heard multiple people in the Al-Anon groups that I've been a part of talk about that.
Yeah.
So I think about this also as a time for cancers. And I'm just using my wife as an example because hers have been really small moments, but they've provided opportunities for her to reflect on truth. What is real? What is not real? What did I assume was real versus the underlying truth of a situation? And how is that causing me to reflect on deeper things within myself? Very valuable process, right? But also maddening in the sense that you almost have to go through a kind of cognitive dissonance at times where it's like, wait, what is this? The other thing that comes to my mind is Mars retrograde in the second can be about a shift or change with respect to money, finances, resources, and also there can be some feeling of powerlessness that comes in around your resources. The other thing that I think about is that in Indian astrology, the second house is related not only to your money, your assets, but it is also related to your family, insofar as your family is a kind of asset, is a kind of resource, something that you rely on. And so I was reading an interesting article about this because a retrograde in the second house can mean that someone that you've come to rely on is no longer reliable. I thought that's a really interesting interpretation of a second house Mars retrograde. So I'll just throw that in there and note that if that is the case, isn't it interesting that Mars will retrograde back into your first house, perhaps asking you to look at what you have that's available within yourself that has to be deepened, or you have to intensify the connection to what you have because someone or something else isn't as reliable any longer. That might be a good thing. That might be a very empowering thing in the end.
Yeah.
I hear a lot about self-trust there, Adam. You know, that's one of the best things that I've ever had happen is when people confirm my perceptions. And I say, thank you for confirming what I saw.
Yeah.
Thank you for validating that I saw that, because it really does clear up your vision a lot for other things in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'll take Mars. I'll take the Leo horoscope here. Alex, sit back and enjoy.
Tell me my skin's going to clear up because I have my Mars and Leo zit. Like clockwork.
Oh my gosh. So, yeah, we have Mars in Leo in your first house. I think that for Leos, this is about going through, I mean, first of all, any kind of shift with respect to the actual prana, or like life force or chi, or whatever we want to call it, in your body. Because to me, when Mars gets into the first house and then it slows down and it retrogrades, one of the great benefits is to look at your vital energy, look at your life force and say, how am I using it? Is, you know, we need like a strong fire of digestion, for example. And we need to move our body and move our blood and stuff like that. And I think Mars retrograde can heighten the awareness of what we need to do to be running with full energy, life force energy, not just getting more work done or something like that. But like, how do we feel vital? How do we feel alive? And what revisions or shifts or changes can we make so that we're increasing the feeling of vitality? That comes to my mind with Mars retrograde in the first. Also, just questions about, am I being a powerful, creative agent in the world? Do I feel empowered, confident, bold? Am I exploring the shadows like aggression or arrogance or dominance or something like that? I don't think a lot of people listening to this are going to be like that, but there's an unconscious side maybe there that has to be explored. Also, how do I deal with conflicts, right? Mars opposite Pluto across the 1st and 7th. Can I manage to work through difficult or tense situations with other people without losing myself, but also without giving too much away? It's like, don't give too much away. Don't be too much. Don't give away too much. Both of those things maybe getting worked on. The Saturn-Jupiter square across the 8th and the 11th for Leos, that's interesting because it suggests to me that there are certain soul contracts in your life that are going to limit options. It's like Jupiter in Gemini in the 11th to me is like, the cross pollinators in a big field of flowers in the spring or whatever. It's just busy and lots of things happening, lots of possibilities. Saturn in Pisces in the 8th might be saying certain obligations or commitments are going to require that only some of these options are available or are appropriate. Is Saturn holding us back too much? Do we have to kind of break free of that? Or is Saturn really holding us accountable to certain contracts, certain obligations, certain responsibilities that need to shape or refine the options that we have socially, professionally, in terms of groups or people that we want to be with or we think are advantageous for us? So I look at there being a kind of a social negotiation that's happening between some really important relationships that we are bound to in love and duty and so forth, and then a bustling field of possibilities in the 11th.
Dana, I'll take my reading from you now.
Okay, great. I got you. I was thinking about how like the 8th and the 11th are both about where you fit with others. It has to do with, where you stand with other people. And a Leo rising, I always think of as someone who is an individual. They are interested in their unique light and shining. And that is beautiful. I think that the retrograde of Mars in the 1st might feel frustrating for all of us. But like for a Leo especially, it's like, I just want to do me. Like I have this perception of who I want to be and how I want to spend my time and where I want my energy to go. And yet I have these obligations with other people. So it's navigating that. And if we think back to like what we said at the beginning of this is maybe a time to just kind of observe and assess. I think the entry point for that with Leos is like, where am I feeling frustrated about my obligations to other people and why? And that's like the point for inquiry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that all sounds dead on for my life right now. And, just to say that I think, I'm putting this in general terms, I'm extrapolating from my own experience right now, but that Saturn-Jupiter square has been very interesting because I think it at once makes very apparent what is important, and you need to focus on those soul contracts that it's like, yeah, you know what, I need to invest in this. I need to grow with this. I need to commit with this, all very Saturn ideas. And just by doing that, there's a negation of certain things that in Gemini, with Jupiter and Gemini, it's like, well, that could be fun. That could be fun. You could do this, but it's not really like filling you. It's not really giving you any satisfaction. It's not really, something that feels like it's there for the long term. And I think that it's also making the differentiation between soul contracts that you really want to commit to, invest in, deepen, and those that are imposing a sense of constriction or restriction because they have their own agenda or they want something from you. It's like, you start going, but I feel bad or I feel guilty or, I'm obligated to do this in some way. And so I think that might be the discernment that's coming up, particularly with Mars getting caught up in a retrograde cycle of like, what I really want to invest in terms of my connections, my deepening connections, and what what is actually something I need to set a boundary with because it's holding me back in some way that's not healthy.
Right. Leos, good luck.
Godspeed.
Virgos. Virgos, you are up next. And we have Mars retrograding in your 12th house. And we have the square from Jupiter and Saturn across 10 and 7.
So it's kind of similar in a way, looking at this configuration. But what I would say for Virgos is you have this Mars, this Mars retrograde starting in your 12th house. It may feel like as you're getting towards the station, which is, I think, December 7th, the station retrograde, there's this subconscious, subterranean, behind the scenes place in you that's saying, like, it's time for me to bust out and be on stage and I don't want to be supporting cast. I want to be Evita. That's what I want to be. Like that sort of feeling, right? I want to be main character. And there's something that starts to happen around the retrograde, and then you get the Jupiter-Saturn square, kicking in not long after that, where there's a feeling like, but if I do that, my relationships, how I'm seen, it's going to start to constrict me in some way. I'm going to feel bad about it. I'm not going to feel like I'm able to, or I'm going to feel there's a sense of commitment, or whether it's healthy or unhealthy, a sense of restriction, healthy or unhealthy, because there can be healthier forms of that are coming from others that are imposing that will on me in some way. So I think one of the things for Virgos that's really interesting, because I think Virgos do tend towards, again, other and being service oriented and being very much about what another person needs and expects, is having this little bit of like, I'm feeling like I'm really busting out here. And then around the retrograde, maybe reviewing where you're feeling tied or held down or restricted by that sense of obligation, by that sense of like, I'm selfish for doing something for myself. It's not right for me to want to do something for myself. And that you have this wonderful Jupiter and Gemini up at the top of your chart that is also helping you then say, okay, that may be something you're feeling, but is there a way to experiment with how you're seen in the world, how you're known in the world, how you have been in the world, that doesn't pull you out of your value system, but also allows you to feel free and playful and experimental in some way.
Love that.
I'm thinking about the 12th houses. Adam, I watched the 12th house workshop a couple months ago when you did it. I didn't finish it, but it was very good and very helpful. And I remembered what you were, I'm not going to say it as eloquently as you did, but just the idea that the 12th house is moving toward the first. So whatever's happening in the 12th, it's like something that wants to be seen. It's something that is making its way to the first, but doesn't, and so I'm thinking about that as I think about Mars in the 12th, knowing that this square is so, as you said, Alex, like it's really about, it's not about the individual. It's about how I'm seen in the world and who I am in my partnerships. But there's this thing happening behind the scenes. There's this thing happening in the 12th that's needling, that's, forcing you maybe to, it's just making you feel a little uncomfortable, I guess, and making you kind of ask some tough questions. I think all of us with this Mars retrograde, like the thing is to surrender. The thing is to let go and see what happens. I think that is underscored for Virgo risings because of where it's at in your chart. There's going to be lots of questions, maybe not a whole lot of answers right this moment. But if you can just like be with what is, we might get some more information just by observing rather than trying to do more.
That's an interesting take. I like that. I'm looking at Mars in the 12th and thinking about the feeling of being ineffective, like that I'm struggling because I feel like what I do doesn't work or what I do doesn't matter, or maybe even feeling like my, that internal sense of Mars, whether it's your willpower or your confidence or your sense of strength and pride in yourself as an individual, it feels like it's stuck, or it feels like it is a source of frustration or difficulty. I'm thinking of my Virgo rising daughter, who, as soon as Mars entered the 12th house, I just noticed like, wow, she's feeling really frustrated often right now, and started kind of probing into that. And I noticed, and she's just about to turn 9, right? So she's frustrated with the fact that she is a nice person and therefore has a hard time being assertive when something has reached a certain point where it's too much for her. Like if her little sister is just way over the top bothering her and she gets angry or frustrated, she feels terrible about having gotten angry or frustrated. You know what I mean? Like, because she's like, I'm a good person, very Virgo rising. So I just think about those struggles with Mars and willpower and strength and force and assertiveness as something of it's a difficult spot for Virgos to deal with that, I think.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is interesting is Saturn in the 7th can be, well, Jupiter's in the 10th can also be about the feeling that you're obligated emotionally or karmically or psychologically to other people and their needs or their weaknesses or their ineptitudes that somehow bind and obligate you, where Jupiter in the 10th might be wanting to be freer, looser, happier, more experimental. And Saturn in the 7th might be saying, no, you can't do that because I'll feel left behind if you do that. Or no, you can't do that because I don't like you looking free. It makes me feel insecure. You know what I mean? Like, so I've noticed, for example, again, in my 9-year-old, that she has some friends right now that, as she's sort of spreading her wings socially, are getting really needy, right? Because they've been BFFs, and that kids go through this, right? This is normal. It's not like anything spectacular. I just think it's interesting that it's happening as Saturn and Jupiter are tightening in her 10th and her 7th. It's like she wants to expand, and certain relationships are feeling more threatened by that.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that's really interesting. So anyway, just two different takes to add into the mix. Hopefully this gives you all a lot to think about with Virgos. Alex, do you want to add anything?
No, I was just thinking that is a big deal for a kid. Those are big things we go through, and it's kind of their world. Their whole world revolves around those types of things. And I think it's also, what I hear too, Adam, is Mars in the 12th is also hidden power. I feel bad about it. I feel bad, but there's also a, but I'm discovering this too at the same time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's funny. I said to her, I think this is something that you guys will appreciate, right? So I'm noticing this transit Mars in Leo. I'm like, well, there's, in the meantime, the sun is entering Sagittarius, and I'm thinking about dad, right? I mean, I'm like, I'm her dad. So Mars in Leo in the 12th. And I said, I had this conversation with her. I'll just make it really simple. I said, what we want as parents, all parents, if they really care about their kids, they want you to emulate all the best qualities and leave the ones that aren't so great. Mm-hmm. And she understood that. And I said, for example, when I get really grumpy and I'm more irritable and I'm not as patient, I don't want you to have that. I want you to have my patience and blah, blah, blah. So we were talking about this. And she said, it's really hard because she said, when you get really angry with me and frustrated with me, then it feels like your anger stays in me for a little while. And then it's my anger, and I don't like that. And I was like, wow, that is wow.
Yeah, that's going to stay with you for a long time.
I was like, oh shit, I was like, oh, just almost wanted to cry. It just broke my heart, Yeah. But I also recognize that, and I don't mean any disrespect to my parents. It was a different time. It was a different generation. I never had a conversation like that once with my parents. You know what I mean? Where there was like, let's talk about the best of me and the not so best of me and try to take some accountability and let her talk about her experience of me. Like, I have to take trust in the fact that these conversations will do good, and hopefully more good than the difficulties of my own defects, But these are the kinds of things that come up with the 12th house Mars, it's these explorations of things that you don't always know where they're coming from. They're part of you, but they might be part of your dad. They might be part of your family. They might be a part of someone at school that, tripped you in gym class. There's a boy who tripped her in gym class, right? Mm-hmm. And it took like an hour for me to figure out, she was so mad and treating everyone so poorly. And I said, what's wrong? And she finally broke down crying, saying, this kid tripped me at gym class, and I've been really angry ever since.
Oh,
That's a 12th house Mars right there. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Yeah.
Holding on to that.
Yeah. She's a Sagittarius. And so she's super fiery as well. And I feel like part of the journey for Sages that I've noticed anyway, and maybe Alex can tell us whether this is true or not with a little Sag in your chart, is that you wield fire. And so it's like, got to make sure you figure out how to be a passionate, charismatic person that knows how to deal with frustration, because the fire will burn you when you're frustrated, you know?
Yeah. Or the fire will come out in a really bad way. That's what, trust me.
Right?
The fire, then you're breathing fire sometimes, and that's yeah. Become mother of dragons.
Yeah, totally. Okay, well, let's move on to Libras, and we will pass the torch here to Dana, and we're looking at Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. We'll have to pick up our pace a little bit, I'm noticing, since we're moving shorter to our deadline today for time for all of us.
Okay, I'll go quick. Libra risings, I love you because I am you. And this is going to be weird maybe, but bear with me. The first thing that came to my mind when I started thinking about Libras was the phrase, a crisis of confidence. And I'm like, okay, I've heard that before. What is that? I look it up. Speech by Jimmy Carter. Also known as the malaise speech, like the malaise of the American spirit. I'm not trying to make this about politics, although for you Libras, like, it might be. But I think that phrase came to my mind for a reason, because we've got Jupiter in the 9th, your spiritual views, your philosophies, your operating principles. You're learning and growing right now in that realm of your life. And then you've got Saturn in the 6th house that says, shit might be hard right now. It might feel hard. And it made me think about like the question of evil, right? Like if there's a benevolent God or source or creator, like how can evil exist? Like these big questions might be coming up for Libras. I really want to lean into this spiritual kind of exploration that I'm doing in the 9th, but my daily life feels really hard. And I'm looking around, I'm seeing it's hard for other people. So what do I do with that? I think that's the friction that this square is speaking to. And then you've got Mars in the 11th house. So thinking about like the 11th being the house of your ambition or like the thing that you're striving toward, you might be unsure about that right now. You might be questioning, what is that arrow pointing to? Like, I thought I was going in this direction and now I'm not so sure. And that could be, linked to this kind of philosophical questioning that's going on with the square that we were just talking about. It might also be about like, is this where I belong? Like I'm in this group of people and I don't know if we vibe. Like, I don't know if we're really in alignment the way that I thought we were. Is this what I want? And knowing that Mars is going back into the 10th, it does for me lean more to like, where am I going? But certainly like the people you surround yourself with are a part of that. So I think there's big questions looming for Libras right now. And as a fellow Libra rising, I would definitely suggest surrender. As someone who struggles mightily with that, I think specifically like surrender to the fact that you can't know everything. You can't have the question, or you can't have all the answers to all the questions. There are some questions that we just have to sit with and accept that they're unanswerable.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Adam.
No, that's fine.
I'll quickly say about Mars in the 11th. What keeps coming to me about this for Libras is the king or the queen can have their counsel and the council can give their input, but you're the king or the queen. And it's about executive decision making, about like, and sometimes, it can be very hard for Venus ruled signs, Libra, I think in particular, to say, this is the decision I am making. And you're going to get a lot of peanut gallery around you, I think, at this time. And everybody can be vying for this, your majesty, this, your majesty, this, your majesty, this, your majesty. And you're like, okay, cool. Well, I have to make my own decision. And I think that might be something that's coming up around this too.
Yeah, I love that. I love that a change in philosophy may be closely connected to changes within groups or communities and questions about power, leadership, influence within them. Yeah, keep it simple there. All right, let's move on to Scorpio. I've got Scorpio, so we're going to look at Mars retrograde in your 10th and the Jupiter-Saturn square across your 8th and 5th. Starting off with Mars retrograde in the 10th, I've noticed in the charts of my clients over the years that a Mars retrograde in the 10th will often coincide with your boss changing. It's like a weirdly specific thing, but it's almost like who wields the power or authority in the workplace going through some kind of change. It can also be about changes or shifts in the power dynamics within a workplace. And sometimes it's not like, I know it sounds weird because you think a Mars retrograde would only mean difficulties. A lot of people, we think that way about retrogrades, but a reversal of circumstances such that you have more leadership or responsibility than you had before and you have to adapt or adjust to that is not out of the question here, as you also may be stripped of some level of power or responsibility and feel frustrated by it. So it can kind of go in either direction. Also, what motivates you and what you are feeling passionate about in your career. You might be going through some changes with Mars also retrograding back into the 9th. I think these changes in career will be linked to ongoing explorations around philosophy, beliefs, almost like a bit of an existential and spiritual crisis that might be closely linked to transformation of your work. The other piece here is the Jupiter-Saturn square. Jupiter and Saturn together in this house, these two houses, for people who are parents, and I know not everyone who listens is a parent, but for those of you who are, I could see this being very much about the way that you and a spouse are shifting or changing parenting approaches, strategies, philosophies, making decisions about how to allocate funds. Maybe you're getting ready to send a kid to preschool and you're trying to get the budget together to do it. Whatever the case may be, I could see there being a lot of emphasis on the cooperative dimension of parenting. That's very specific. So let me back up and talk about one other thing. I also think that Saturn in the 5th house will, at its worst, will present us with real inhibitions or like restrictions around pleasure or around creative expression. And I just wonder if some of, like for Scorpios, are your own fears or inhibitions or worries or anxieties or difficulties accessing pleasure keeping you from possibilities and playfulness that other people are trying to bring in? And almost like, is there an opportunity to open yourself more to let other people bring in some dimension of flexibility or freedom or fun that maybe you're having a hard time trusting? On the other hand, if there's reasons not to trust someone or something, then you got to stick with those doubts or suspicions. If someone's trying to bring something into your life and you know that you have a hard time being moderate with it, well, that's a different situation entirely, right? But yeah, those are some of the things that come to my mind. What do you guys think?
I think I see Saturn and Pisces dovetailing off that, Adam. Saturn and Pisces reminds me sometimes of Father Mapple from Moby Dick. You have to obey God, and to obey God is hard because you have to disobey yourself, and it gets really like intense. Just like, okay, dude, you want to go on the ship now. But there's something where you could be getting that sense of like, everything just gets really intense and hard and difficult, and someone just comes in and says, we need to go to a paint class and just chill out. But what that will require is a letting go of some of the control. Just letting go of some of the control of feeling like, I have to dig down and hold on and before I can have any fun, I have to figure it all out. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just have to go for a walk, or you have to, do something fun and let your mind go blank for a little while and things come to you. So just noticing that if the grip's getting really tight, that playfulness, I think, is a really important antidote this month.
Nice.
Yeah. Similar to what you both have said, I'm thinking about how Jupiter in the 8th suggests that any kind of stuckness or restriction we're feeling in the 5th house can be, there's expansion through other people. That maybe if we can learn to lean on the people who we're in partnership with, we can find a little more expansion. Also thinking about like sexual transcendence, like, I don't know, it's there for me. I'm thinking about the 5th house. I'm thinking about the 8th house. Like that's there. That's a part of this, especially to thinking about like the powerlessness in the 10th, the potential, like, of course it's not guaranteed, but the potential for feeling a little powerless or a little impotent in the 10th, like I think it's really important for Scorpios to try to lean on the people who can help them access that expressive kind of that self-expression, that creativity that could just really be an antidote to that feeling of powerlessness that might come up.
Yeah. Submission and surrender can be interpreted in many ways.
Yes.
Some of them can be pretty fun.
Okay, let's move on to Sagittarius, where we have Jupiter and Saturn squaring in the 7th and 4th, and we have Mars retrograding in the 9th.
Okay, so for Sagittarius, I think there may feel like, we are, I'm a Sag sun, but I'll speak as the royal we here, are usually looking to the boundless hope of the horizon, and anything is possible. And definitely relationally right now, that might be true. If with Jupiter in your 7th house, there might be this feeling of like boundless exploration and fun and enjoyment. And then Saturn from the 4th exerts some kind of restraint on that may come from ancestral beliefs. In Pisces, they may be ancestral religious or spiritual beliefs. Or it could be an emotional history of the family where it's like, I want to feel free and open and excited in my relationships or in meeting people, or if you're in a committed relationship, exploring more fun in that. But there's a sense of weight from the past that holds you down a little bit. It could even be, I think sometimes with Pisces too, I see a lot of nostalgia with Pisces. Like there could be a comparison of current relationships to an image or an idealized image of the past that might be weighting you down a little bit. And then you have Mars moving into your 9th house, starting to retrograde in the 9th. I could see the consideration of really wanting to move forward more ambitiously with like maybe a degree or some more higher education. It could be moving forward with like a martial art, some sort of like spiritual martial principle that you're using to hone and develop your mind. But it may feel like you're being pulled back again into more of like is that okay for me to do based on my family? Because Mars is heading back towards Cancer. Is it okay for me to do based on the older, more deep emotional ties that I have from my past? So I see like the past and the future in a little bit of a tension or conflict here this month in a lot of ways.
That's really interesting. My husband's a Sag rising, and that is very accurate, like for him specifically. You had me thinking about Jupiter in the 7th as potentially the partner, though. Like if you're in a partnership, like maybe there is, and you're living together, it could be that something is going well for your partner and they are experiencing this expansion and growth of Jupiter, and you therefore are like picking up the slack at home. Like that's that responsibility in the home. And that can be frustrating, right? That can be, it can be hard if it goes on for a long time and you're not, saying, hey, I need help, or like, hey, I have boundaries. Like I can't do it all for you. Right. I like Mars retrograde in the 9th for Sagittarius then, like with that in mind as, all right, well, like what matters to me? Like what's most important to me? What do I have to prioritize for myself so that, I don't fall apart as I'm trying to help support everybody else.
Interesting. I could see this like just a super specific story that comes to my mind. When let's say when a maybe a recently divorced single mother has to consider the reality of her children at the time that she's meeting someone interesting. Am I going to bring a new man around my kid? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That there's things around home and family that may feel like they're putting a check on opportunities or a kind of expansive openness in relationships. And maybe there's, maybe it's kind of thing where like I've had clients before who have done this where it's been like, well, we're dating and I'm not going to tell my kids until I know that it's substantive, and then I'm going to tell them and they'll meet. And then, it's not going to be a thing where the person moves in right away. This is my boy. It's like there's an incremental reframing of marriage and family that has to take place, and it has to take place over a long period of time. So gradualness comes to my mind for Sages. I don't think Sag risings are the greatest when it comes to gradual things, incremental things. It's Jupiterian, you know, right? It's like, let's go, you know. But Mars also, the thing about Mars and Leo in the ninth to me is that, you know, Sages live with, there's a lot of pride, personal pride that's placed in your convictions. It's like a huge creative outlet for Sages, has to do with just expressing what you feel very passionately about, whether it's your beliefs or your ideas, or even just a funny thought that comes to mind, or, you know, whatever it is. And I wonder right now if there isn't some need to accommodate other perspectives, and that, you know, if you're used to being like the life of the party, or you're used to being able to be kind of loud and big with your energy, even if you're a lovely person, you might face some pushback and some need to sort of refine, or like make your expression of will and belief like more socially adaptive or something like that.
Yeah.
Just an idea. On the other hand, I could just look at Mars in the ninth and think, hey, you're going to be like exploring what beliefs are effective in your life and which are not, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
Let's go to Capricorn, and we'll hand off to Dana. We've got Mars retrograde in the 8th, and we have the Jupiter-Saturn square across 6 and 3.
Okay. So I'm thinking about Saturn in the 3rd as having to be the one that does it all. Like, you're picking up the kids from school. You're the one that's cleaning that, like, you are the responsible one. You're the one people are leaning on in the daily minutia of life. And that might be like not super fun for you. You might be over that. It might have to do with siblings too. I've been thinking about Jupiter in the 3rd as like, my mom, when her mom passed, was the executor of the will, right? Like, that was very Jupiter in the 3rd, or I'm sorry, Saturn in the 3rd, having to be responsible for the siblings and rounding them up. Jupiter in the 6th tells me, though, that there is help. Like, knowing that the 6th house is a place that we think of as, you know, having to do hard things, and Jupiter being here, it's like, well, maybe you don't have to do it all. Like, maybe you could ask for help, and maybe people are going to be there to help you. Maybe there's an easier way to do these hard things. Maybe there is, even with Saturn, like, maybe there's a way we can condense all of these several many things we do over the day. And like, as we've been saying with Mars, work smarter, not harder. So I like the square as a moment where you say, all right, what can I let go of here? Like, how can I make things a little more simple, a little more easy? Thinking about Mars in the 8th, I'm thinking about a clearing or a cleansing of like how you merge with others, and reconsidering or renegotiating your agreements. So something about the agreements you're a part of sort of standing out as like, I don't know if I signed up for this. Like, I don't know about this. Is this what I want? Is this the right boundary between like what's mine and what's not? And I think that Mars retrograde will make it harder to demarcate those boundaries. So if you notice that the agreements are not quite what you wanted them to be, or not quite what you thought you signed up for, that's a good thing to notice. And that's a good thing to reflect on. And you may not know what the solution is right now, but it's a good thing to notice and kind of take note of, and see what you can arrive at as you reflect on that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that for Capricorn rising, sometimes the hard work is the experimenting with something you're not sure is going to work. You haven't tested. You don't know that there's solid ground underneath it. And I think that Jupiter and Gemini will actually be the little fly in the ointment here in a really interesting and fun way, where it's like, the impetus usually is to push forward, do more, achieve more, go higher. And Jupiter and Gemini is just like, what if you did something completely different? You know, I think of Monty Python, now for something completely different. That kind of feeling for Capricorns can feel very unsteady and a little shaky, but it could make all the difference. I think that might actually be the hard work, is just saying like, where can I loosen up a little bit? Where can I play? Where can I try something I've never tried before? And just what the hell? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the possibility that let's just say that Mars retrograde in the 8th could mean that someone or maybe a few people in your life that have been problematic are not going to be problematic anymore. Like when I think about Mars in the 8th, one of the things that comes to my mind would be soul contracts with people that provide you with conflict. We all have them. We all have people in our lives that, for whatever reason, are sort of like our enemies. And none of us would probably say that's my enemy. Like everyone's been taught we don't think of people as enemies. We're all very Christian in our culture. And so we don't think of people, but they are. They're like, that person gets my goat, or this particular individual is a thorn in my ass. Whatever I think of them, I just get a little mad. Okay, so the reality is that people like that are in our lives for reasons we don't always understand. In time, we sometimes do. But I wonder right now if certain soul contracts for Capricorns are about to get lighter and easier, or if you're about to be free from some of them, because those people who have been problematic are leaving, or the contract's done. You're paying off a debt. It's over. It's time for it to be finished. And that I'm going to say because I know someone personally who is a Capricorn rising, and they will be completing a divorce around early December. And aside from division of assets, which they have all worked out, their life is about to get significantly less stressful because of just dealing with this conflict all the time. Yeah. And I'm like, that is perfect for a Cap rising who has Mars about to station turn retrograde as they are releasing this conflicted relationship. So that's what had me think of it, but just an idea there to throw out. All right, let's move on to Aquarius. This is me. So I'll look at Mars retrograde in the 7th with the Jupiter-Saturn square across the 2nd and 5th. So speaking of divorces, of course, Mars retrograde in the 7th is known for bringing about conflict resolution. And sometimes that does mean the end of a relationship. Like, how do you resolve the conflict? By going your separate ways. So it can mean that. It can also be about staying together and mediating or resolving conflicts, or learning how to balance the equation of power and will in relationships. Those would be very positive manifestations. So things can express with Mars retrograde in the 7th very differently from person to person, but an emphasis on power and relationships. And how does the individual reality of each person and the collective reality of the relationship, how do they coexist? These are deep questions for Mars retrograde in the 7th. The other thing Saturn Jupiter brings to my mind would be a conversation about resources and creative fulfillment or happiness. It's like, it's hard to be happy if you don't feel like you have anything, if you're living with scarcity. Yeah. If you're on the poverty line, or, so there might be questions right now about how do we build something that is sustainable and allows for a little bit more flexibility and fun in our lives, and making some hard choices on how to prioritize time, money, energy, maybe what you're doing for a living, or how you earn, or where you work, because there is a need to not live with a feeling of that weighty, difficult struggle to survive all the time. On the other hand, I could see this also being about, you have plenty, but you live as though you have nothing because there's an anxiety. A lot of people have inherited that because they grew up in difficult conditions, and then it's hard even when you have enough to think that you do. And so I read an article once that said that people who live with like $300,000 a year and people who live with like $80,000 a year, there was a test that was done on like how comfortable and enjoyable the lifestyle is, and it's like they're comparable. Mm-hmm. But I would say that my sort of response to hearing about that study somewhere, this was maybe a couple of years ago that I heard this, was like, yeah, but if you make $100,000, but you grew up on the poverty line, that 100,000 you may never be able to enjoy. You may never. So anyway, my point is just that this combination may also be about learning to trust that what you have is enough, and that you can trust and enjoy somehow what is present, as opposed to living with the other shoe may drop mentality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking also at this Mars retrograde in the 7th house. Is there might be somebody in your life, it could be in a relationship, someone you're dating, someone in your life who's passionately asserting themselves in some way, and they're advocating for a need. And I think it would be interesting to see and important to see, how are they doing that? Are they doing it in a way that feels like it's like, okay, there's something I'm really passionate about and want to do here, and expressing it respectfully, or is it becoming disrespectful in some way? And there could be both. I could see with Mars and Leo in the 7th house. And I think the impetus of the Aquarius is always to sort of look towards the connected systems of data and the community, and how is this working for everybody. And there might be some tensions here this month between the way you have a sensibility about like the group or the collective or the relationships, and somebody needling it a little bit by saying like, but this is what I need. This is what I'm looking for. And that could be an interesting tension that could produce a lot of wonderful beneficial results. But it's just, I would watch for how it's being presented and who presents it, who's presenting it, and in what way. Would be important. Yeah.
I think what you both said is so important. Like, I actually just gave a reading to one of my best friends who's an Aquarius rising, and she said one of my biggest shadows, I guess, is like, or things I'm trying to work through, is like this belief that I'm not fun. And I was like, well, good for you that Jupiter's in your 5th house right now. Like, now is the time to work through that. Mm-hmm. And I think what you said, Adam, about scarcity is really an important part of that too. Like, scarcity is not just about money, although certainly it can be in the 2nd house. Like, yeah, we're talking about your assets and what you have, but like your ability to approach life with an open hand and just kind of like meet the moment. I think if you're living in scarcity, that's hard to do. So that might be part of this, is like learning how to just kind of open up to fun. And I think about the fact that Pluto's in your 1st house now. By the time we're getting this retrograde, like the 7th house is where other people are mirrors. So like Alex was saying, what are the assertive, dominant forces, people in your life, in your, periphery? What are they reflecting back to you about something that's trying to alchemize in your identity and your self-concept?
Nice. Good stuff. Let's move on to our final sign in Pisces. And we forgot to start with Pisces today.
Oh my God. Don't come for us. So sorry.
They're going to be so angry in their own little Pisces way.
Dude, no, you're not. I have had so many people who were like, thank you, and then you just messed it up.
Sorry.
Dear Pisces.
We love you, Pisces. We love you.
We are very sorry. And we will do better. We can do better. We are going to listen.
Fortunately, you've got Mars going retrograde in your 6th, so you can write Adam lots of comments.
I'm really sorry, guys. So Mars is retrograde in your 6th. Saturn and Jupiter are square in your 1st and 4th. You always get the short end of the stick. Everything's bad. No, I'm just kidding. We'll put you next, or we'll put you first next month, and then we'll even do the month after that to make up. We'll do 2 in a row for Pisces rising. Okay,
Pisces. Since we've established our genuine love for you, there's Saturn in your 1st, squaring Jupiter in your 4th. I could see this as getting a little bit stuck in who you think you are and who you need to be, and maybe about Saturn and Pisces. I could see a little bit of getting kind of like caught in a melancholy, or caught in a just kind of feeling, I don't know, it's everything's just whatever, that sort of kind of feeling. And Jupiter in the 4th house might be someone in your home, something from your past, something from your parents or your ancestry that's just being like, yeah, but the world is fun and exciting and enjoyable and yay. And there's a lot of stuff. It's like, I don't know. It's just like, can I be? So, there is a time to, and I don't mean this facetiously, but to write your poetry and to do your watercolors and to do all of that stuff, to express out your feelings of how you're feeling. There's also a time to to dance when nobody's watching, and to, paint or write or just write things down that you just want to write, that don't have any necessarily meaning behind it, but have a sense of fun expression. Dancing while nobody's watching is just a random example that I have never done myself before, but that just came for Pisces. So that's just kind of what I'm going with there. And, you know, Mars with the 6th house retrograde. I would say that this is the beginning of something that might feel like it's going to take some tenacity to work through in that regard. And it might feel like you don't have the gas in the tank for the tenacity right around this retrograde, but don't worry, because that will come back in full force in mid-April when Mars moves back into Leo. So this just might be the beginning of that process for you.
Yeah.
I think about Saturn in the 1st and how Pisces risings have had to just put on your big people pants. Like, you have really had to step up in terms of responsibility and just dealing with shit. And Leo, Mars retrograde in Leo to me is saying, like, fuck it. Like, I can't do it. I'm done. Goodbye. But as Alex said, like, I feel like it's really important to remember, like, this is like all things, like every moment, this is a temporary moment. And you know what? It's okay to take a break. Like, look at it as like, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to step away. I'm going to put it down, and then I'll come back when I'm not overwhelmed. And definitely to lean on the comfort, whether that's like your family, the people in your family, you know, taking a trip back to like a meaningful place that is nostalgic and sort of like fills your tank, fills your cup, but also tending to the inner sanctuary. You know, the 4th house is not necessarily like a spiritual place, but I do think about it as like the inner temple. And I think if you can like establish some kind of rituals that help you feel grounded in yourself, that will really help.
Yeah. I feel like with Mars retrograde in the 6th, this very specific kind of image or story comes to my mind where, you know, Pisceans are so sensitive and empathic. It's the exaltation of Venus. And, you are committed to people and to feeling and to harmony and beauty. So such lofty qualities. There's nothing more puzzling than someone who just doesn't give a shit about you, right? Who, like, Mars retrograde in the 6th house could be someone in your life. Maybe it's someone who's been there for a while, who's like, yeah, I don't care about you. I don't care about your feelings. I care about me. And I've noticed that, you know, Pisceans will often have to deal with, this is an aversion between Leo and Pisces. There's, you know, what a person like that is doing, in addition to being a pain in the ass and someone that you probably don't need in your life, right, is they're holding in some ways up a mirror to you and saying, don't be so caring, so empathic that you lose track of what is actually good for you and who is actually a good fit for you and what you actually deserve and what you don't deserve. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you can get this empowerment from such people where you go, it crushes you at first to think that someone could walk all over you, treat you like a doormat. But then in a weird way, you may find it empowering to be like, no, why can't I be strong? You know, like, if this person's going to be self-centered, I can be a good person and I can be a healthy kind of self-centered, you know, in a self and centered kind of way. So I think about that as maybe a lesson coming through somehow for Pisceans right now.
Love that.
Kind of like the empath narcissist type thing.
Yeah. That's yes, exactly. We're going to stop it there because we are out of time. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I want to tell you how you can connect with Dana and Alex. So Dana can be found at selfhelpwitch.com. You can also find her on Instagram at selfhelpwitch. Book a reading with her, check out what she's up to, all of the latest. And then for Alex, it is alexamorosi.com, where you can book a reading, check out his newsletter, Alex Amorosi Healing on Instagram. Great people to follow. And if you like their content here, then I highly recommend checking out what they're up to, getting a reading with them to help you unpack some of these transits. That is it for us. We will be back. The next time we see you, we'll be looking at a new year. Ooh. And we'll be looking at, maybe we'll even do like a live stream together for horoscopes to end the Kickstarter or something like that.
Fun.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Alex and Dana, and we will see you all again next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. I'm going to tell you about the different rewards that we offer when you donate and support our channel in the year ahead. So you'll find a link to the Kickstarter in the description of this video, in the comments section of this video, as well as on our website, nightlightastrology.com. If you head over there, you'll see at the top of the page there is a menu item that says Kickstarter 2025. You can click on that and be taken over to the Kickstarter campaign page. So once you're there, if you scroll down on the right-hand side, you're going to see different pledge levels and different gifts and sales that we run as a way of saying thank you for your support. So among those, our most popular offering by far are the major discounts that we offer on our training programs. So if you are interested in studying astrology at Nightlight in 2025, whether you're a brand new student or a currently enrolled student who's thinking of taking one of our year 2, 3 horary programs, you're going to find that these are the best rates that we run on the entire year. And we do this as a way of both saying thank you and also of helping us raise funds to support the channel, our staff, and everything we do. So you'll see attend one Nightlight course there. That's about 50% off the total cost of the program and about $500 off the early bird rate. And then you'll scroll down and you'll see that if you bundle 2 courses together, the savings go way up. Bundle 3, they go up even more. I mean, the difference between the 2 and 3 class package is $200. So $200 more, you get 3 of our year-long programs. And if you get all the way to the 4 class pass, then you have all 4 years of our program. You can take them at any pace you like, renew them whenever you like. There's no timeline on when you use these class passes. And you will have all 4 years of content at about 75% off each of the programs individually when you get that bundle. So those are our best savings for sure. Highly recommend those. If you have any questions about our courses or programs, email us info@nightlightastrology.com or look at the website under the classes page, courses page. You'll find information about each of the individual courses we offer. And then if you scroll up, you're going to find some of our other programs that are greatly discounted. Ashley's Herbal Foundations apprenticeship course, which many people are interested in who come through our Moon Circle that Ashley and I lead each month. You scroll up, you're going to find our Masterclass series for 2025, greatly discounted, as well as our Roots and Spheres Moon Circle, greatly discounted. There's hundreds of dollars of savings in each of those. So we really try to make sure that the Kickstarter acts as a good flash sale for all of our programs. You'll then find some really nice prices on previous archive talks, like our 2024 archive masterclass bundle, which is about 30 hours worth of content on specialized topics in astrology. You can see the topics listed in each of the bundles as you scroll through. 2023's masterclass bundle, huge savings on those and a lot of really great content. You'll see a few reading options as you continue to go from the bottom to the top. You'll see the 2025 year ahead mini reading. There's only 30 of these. These are individualized birth chart readings that I do looking at the most significant transit in your birth chart for 2025. I record those personally. You'll then see that there is an Ask 3 Horary Questions option where you can get 3 horary questions to redeem whenever you'd like within the year ahead. Those are kind of yes, no predictive questions. Will I get the job? Will we get together? Things like that. Then you'll see the Astrology for Complete Beginners course is also discounted through the Kickstarter. This is a great 10 hours worth of content for people who are brand new to astrology. So whether that's you or maybe a gift for somebody else. And then you're going to see some individual master classes that are greatly discounted from the past year. So all of 2024's masterclass series are the archives of which 8 to 10 hours each are on sale. And then scroll up a little bit more and you'll see one of our most popular offerings, which are the year ahead horoscope readings. These year ahead horoscope readings include 30 to 45 minutes of a breakdown of all the major transits of the year ahead for each sun and rising signs. You get all of them with this package, which is a great deal. It's like 10 hours worth of content, 8, 9, 10 hours, somewhere in there. I haven't finished recording all of them yet. So as of the time I'm recording this, I'm anticipating it'll land around 10 hours. But yeah, anyway, so you scroll up, you'll see those horoscope videos will all be delivered to you right around January 1st when the Kickstarter ends. Scroll up a little bit more, you'll find The Oracle Speaks, which is my book, and this is being released chapter by chapter. It is a book about the inner experience of learning to speak with oracles, and it is being released chapter by chapter in both text and audiobook form, so you can listen along to my new book. And that takes us up to the Astrology of 2025 video. This, for your donation at the $50 level, gives you an exclusive talk breaking down all of the major astrological transits of 2025. I look in depth at some of the biggest things happening in the year ahead and break them down in advance. And that's the only place I release that video or that take on the whole year ahead. Finally, at the very top, the most basic level of donation, you'll see the Astrology of 2025 calendar. This is a PDF calendar we design and make that allows you to track and move along with the astrology as the year unfolds. This is also great if you want to track what we're going to be talking about week by week on my channel. You'll get a glimpse at the biggest transits of each day and month and week. And that will give you some sense of where we're heading with our coverage of the astrology on the channel as the year unfolds. So again, any questions about any of the rewards that you see, email us info@nightlightastrology. Link is in the description, comments, or on the website, nightlightastrology.com. Help us get to 1,937 backers by January 1st. We deeply appreciate your contribution. We try to make sure we have some really special rewards to say thank you when you contribute. All right, take it easy. Bye.